Now, Washington Mornings on the Mall. 105.9 FM. And AM 630. WMAL.
7:37 on WMAL, where Washington comes to talk. I'm Brian Wilson, and over there, filling in today for the vacationing Larry O'Connor, is fish eater Sharon Jacobus. What are you eating over there? Is it salmon?
It is salmon. It is pink salmon.
All right.
Yes.
Wow.
I want a donut, but I'm having salmon.
Well, then you were no doubt noticing what I ate a little while ago. On the line right now, our good friend KT McFarland, who's a national security analyst for Fox News. Good to have you on the phone, KT. I got a question for you.
Sure.
Okay, so you remember back during the Reagan years, when Ronald Reagan,
actually.
I know, that's why I'm asking you this question specifically. And Ronald Reagan had this idea that you could set up a defensive missile system that would take out missiles, and everybody said, "Oh, he's crazy. It's a waste of money. It will never work." It's just, and on and on. They ridiculed him for having such an idea. I bet that the people of Israel are very happy that Ronald Reagan pursued that idea right now.
Well, I'll tell you one even better. I wrote that speech.
Oh, did you?
It was a Pentagon speech on defense policy and the defense budget, and I wrote the first draft. Now, I wrote the part nobody remembers. President Reagan wrote the part that everybody remembers, which is to talk about the missile shield. The missile shield that the Israelis have is a little bit different. It's the one that Reagan proposed would have been a laser system.
Right.
It would have been, sort of for incoming missiles that are intercontinental ballistic missiles, and this is for incoming conventional missiles at a much lower trajectory. But it's the same principle.
Well, the software behind it all is the same stuff.
Yeah, it's the same idea.
Yeah.
Something's coming in at you, and you hit it with another missile. So it's hitting a bullet with a bullet, if you will.
Yeah. Well, thank goodness.
And the problem with that system, though, is that the Israeli system is working extremely well, but it gets overwhelmed.
Yeah.
It's one thing if a couple are coming in. It's another thing if 100 are coming in.
Yeah, that's true.
And that's why Israel is doing what it's doing. It is trying to take out the 10,000 missiles, especially the long-range missiles, that that Hamas has on the Gaza Strip, in order to be a preemption for any kind of attack, say, down the road. If Israel decides it has no choice but to preempt and attack the nuclear sites in Iran, Iran's retaliation for that would be to launch a barrage of those missiles from the Gaza Strip. And by Israel taking them out now, it means that if Israel attacks Iran later in a preemption, that Iran's counterpunch or its retaliation is greatly reduced.
KT, let's switch gears a little bit here. I want to know what you think about the women in the Congressional Black Caucus basically saying that it's racist and sexist to attack Susan Rice. At least that's what they're saying about Senators McCain and Lindsey Graham. Do you have any thoughts on that? And I guess you might need to be careful, or you could be called racist and sexist yourself. You've been discussing this a little bit this morning.
I don't know. I find it just so sad. Because I was in the Nixon administration. I go back a long way, and I go back to before there were any equal rights for women, where a woman had to make her way in the world because she was smarter and better and more nimble and more capable and worked harder than most men. And I've seen it come full circle with my daughters, who now have equal rights in everything they pursue. And so it really, I think, is so tragic when some women have to come up and hide behind that shield of racism and sexism, when in fact you're just talking about competence or incompetence. Women should be able to stand up like anybody else and say, I screwed it up, or I didn't screw it up, treat me the same way you would treat a man. And to constantly hide behind that shield, I think not only diminishes what women of my generation did, but it makes it really difficult for women of my daughter's generation.
Sure.
Because why? We're way past that now, girl.
We thought we were. And then the president standing up and saying, if you want to come after somebody, come after me. And I think he thought that made him seem like a big man, and he's going to protect Rice and that sort of thing. My view is that it actually hurt her and hurt women. If you're going to be, as is claimed, is it rumored that she will be nominated Secretary of State, she should be able to stand up there and handle herself.
She can't stare down the U.S. press corps, no way she's going to stare down Ahmadinejad or Putin or anybody else.
Very good
point.
point.
And as far as President Obama saying, I'm the tough guy, I'm the Lancelot, I'm come get me, don't get her. Wait a minute. He was the guy who sent her out.
Well,
that's
right. He did. He sent her out there. And they were looking for somebody to go out there with those talking points. Well, turn to Benghazi, though, specifically. And all of it you've heard about David Petraeus' testimony behind closed doors. Obviously, we're hearing, people synthesized versions of what he said. Are you picking up anything that makes any of this any clearer?
Look, it was a cover-up from the very beginning. It was a cover-up from September 11th. And it was a cover-up for a much bigger issue, which is much more than David Petraeus' sex scandal or even the tragic death of 4 Americans. It's that we have totally screwed up the Middle East. President Obama's idea of pulling the rug out from under dictators throughout the region in the Arab Spring, and that somehow the result with the consequence of that was going to be a lot of pro-Western kumbaya democracies was naive in the extreme. What's taken the place of these dictators, these, by the way, pro-American dictators, is chaos and Muslim Brotherhood and anti-Americanism and a war which rages throughout the region, and Al-Qaeda getting footholds in places that it was never anywhere near before. So I think the September 11th cover-up was Obama didn't want to have the world think that his policy had failed right before an election, and 5 days after he said Al-Qaeda was on its heels, and then Al-Qaeda pulls off an attack on American soil, which is what that consulate was, against Americans. I think they had to say, it wasn't terrorists, it was all this other stuff. And then once they said the first lie, then the lies built and built and built. What Petraeus said, I don't think it certainly has cleared up some things, but it begs the question of who did change Susan Rice's talking point.
That's the big question.
Why are we now, so you started with one cover-up, then you had another one. Now you're covering up who sent Susan Rice out on a suicide mission, and then you're trying to sort of protect Susan Rice from having sent her out on the suicide mission now that she's got bullet holes all over her. I mean, it's a much bigger issue, and it is the fact that 2 years ago we had a Middle East that may have been dictators, and it may have been not the happiest place in the world, but places like Egypt had 8% economic growth per year. And what do you now have? Chaos from the Atlantic all the way to Afghanistan.
All right, KT McFarland from Fox News, national security analyst. Always good to have you. I saw you on the 5 the other day.
Yeah, I held my own. I thought I'm just so
Listen,
happy I survived.
Holding your own in that crazy group is an accomplishment. KT, always good to have you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Bye.
Listen, I want to mention that coming up, we're going to have Larry Kudlow in the 8 o'clock hour, but also Virginia Attorney General Ken Cuccinelli to talk about what's going on with all of these reports that we're seeing and hearing about in the Commonwealth of Virginia regarding voter irregularities on voting day. We'll get into that with the Virginia Attorney General Ken Cuccinelli at 8:30.